The way that this is going to work, this is our personal statement workshop for medical, dental, podiatry, optometry, and veterinary school. And what we're going to do, we're going to start out with some exercises that take about 15 minutes for the first one, and then 5 minutes for 2 additional smaller exercises. It's really easy if you're at home or if you're doing this, listening to the virtual presentation, to kind of skip over some of the exercises. But it's a really great way to get started on your personal statement. So I hope that you'll stick with it the full time of the exercises. What we're going to start by doing is doing some brainstorming for personal statement ideas. So I know some of you guys, or it looks like some of you guys are maybe on telephones and can't see the presentation. So I'm going to read this off, but we're going to spend the first 15 minutes doing this first exercise. We're going to be brainstorming some key words and key ideas. So what you're going to do is just take a big piece of paper, a couple smaller pieces of paper, or um, I don't know, a second computer if you happen to have one there. And you want to take 15 minutes and write down everything that you've done, accomplished, participated in, and achieved that you're proud of, characteristics in yourself that you feel have enabled your successes, challenges that you've faced or overcome, your favorite ways to spend your free time, what makes you happy, what do you love, and what people have been important to you. You're not going to have to share this with anyone. This is just for you. So don't be modest, don't censor, don't feel a need to edit. Don't worry if it's important. Just write, put down whatever you think matters. 15 minutes is a long time to do this. And so what'll happen is you will probably, after less than 15 minutes, run out of time or run out of ideas, but stick with it. You'll run out of ideas before the 15 minutes end, but stick with it, because a lot of the time you'll come up with a few kind of aha ideas as that time is stretching. So I can't see you, but don't get up and have that snack even if you want to. You can eat while you're doing this, but try and stick with it. So it's now 12:05 in Eastern time, and we'll do this until 12:20. So, all right, let's get started. And I'm going to pause the recording. And if anybody has questions, feel free to type them in the chat and I will answer. Okay, if you can finish up your last thought here, that's 15 minutes, probably seems longer. We're going to move on to the next exercise here. Oops. So for our next exercise, this will be the second exercise, and this one we're going to take about 5 minutes with. So you may want to use a different color ink. Look at what you wrote down. Think about the commonalities of your experiences and all of the things that you wrote down together, and then draw lines to connect obvious links. You get to decide what's a link, so decide on things that seem logical to you and make those connections. You can use several colors, you can use one color, it's entirely your decision. So it's now 12:21 and we'll finish at 12:26. And I'm going to pause the recording, but folks at home should continue to do this. Okay, so it's 12:26. We're going to get on to our last exercise. So this last exercise, exercise 3, is also going to be about 5 minutes. So what you want to do now is look at all the connecting lines that you have and label them. Think about what are the commonalities and themes, what are the threads that connect your life, and how do they match with the AAMC competencies. And those competencies are the list of things that you have at the top of your self-assessment, so service orientation, social skills, cultural competence, teamwork, oral communication, responsibility, ethical responsibility, reliability, dependability, resilience, adaptability, capacity for improvement, critical thinking, quantitative reasoning, scientific inquiry, living systems, and human behavior. That was a very fast reading of them all. But basically, you want to be creating your own themes or labels and then matching it up later with those competencies. So it's now 12:27. We'll do this for 5 minutes, so we'll finish at 12:32. Okay, so it's 12:32. That is the exercise portion of the presentation. There is, of course, a homework assignment. So the homework assignment, you're going to choose a theme for your essay. When you write your personal statement, you don't want to just sit down and start writing. You want to think about what's going to be the overall point or theme of your statement. Your theme may be one of the labels from the connecting line. So you may look at it and say, well, I have this group of things that all seem to kind of come together to create a sort of a package of information. And that's what I'd like to have my personal statement be. A lot of people do sort of use a formulaic way of putting together their personal statement, so it winds up being about 5 paragraphs. The first paragraph, many people start with a story of some sort, something that kind of an example in some way, something that highlights who you are. So something that introduces basically who the individual is. So they get kind of the admissions committee gets kind of a sense of who you are as a person. But you don't want your entire personal statement to be just story. You also want to back your story up with examples of substance about clinical experience, research experience, community service, leadership, etc. You're not going to be able to talk about everything that you've accomplished during your undergrad and gap time. So you're going to have to choose probably 3 to 5 things that you want to highlight. And you want those things to kind of connect together and have that common thread that runs through it. So this is personal statement is your opportunity to speak directly to the admissions committee. It's your chance to say something that you want to tell them. If there's something in particular about yourself that you want to share with them, this is your opportunity to do that. If you were given the chance to sit down with the admissions person or the admissions director for 5 minutes and talk directly to them and tell them something about you, what would be the thing that you would want them to know? What would be the first thing that you would want them to know about you? Or what would be the first thing that you would want them to understand about you that would help them to make a decision about accepting you into their medical program? You're not going to be able to tell them every single thing about you, like I said, and you may not even be able to tell them every single thing about a certain experience or a certain story. You're not going to be able to tell them everything about your research or about your clinical. You want to make sure that you're giving them enough information that, they're not left hanging on anything. And you want them to be interested in hearing more about you, hopefully in person at an interview. So it's kind of a way of kind of offering them like, oh, this person would be really interesting to bring in to talk to. So this is really critical. This slide is really critical about the personal statement. A personal statement should answer the question, who are you? How are you different from all of the other applicants? And you're not really answering the question, how are you different from the other applicants? You're answering the question, who are you? So you want to give them a little bit of a sense of who are you as an individual. Your personal statement should answer the question, why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to be a physician? Why do you want to be a dentist? Why do you want to be a veterinarian, an optometrist, a podiatrist? So when they finish your personal statement, there should be no doubt in their mind that you're interested in the field that you're applying for. And then a little bit about how are you qualified? So, your experiences to date are your qualifications. So the research you've done, the clinical that you've done, the, the service that you've done, all of these things that you've done demonstrate your qualifications. So you want to choose a few of those to highlight as a part of your personal statement. And then why should they accept you? And a lot of people will talk about this in sort of draw this together in a closing paragraph. So they'll start out with a first paragraph that kind of introduces themselves, maybe a little bit about why they want to be a physician. Then they'll have 3 paragraphs in the middle that'll talk about experiences that they've had that qualify them to be a doctor. So, something about their research, something about their clinical, something about their service, something about academics, um, a, a global experience that they've had. It's going to be really individual for each individual person. But through all of those, you're going to be talking about your experiences, and you're going to be kind of convincing them, through these experiences, I learned that I wanted to be a physician. And you conclude it with something that kind of draws together your entire statement, perhaps goes back to the beginning paragraph, and sort of helps them to see why they want to accept you or why they want to bring you in for an interview also. It should not be generic. So when you finish your personal statement, you really want to make sure that it's not a statement that somebody else could write. So you want to have enough detail about the experiences that you've had that it could not be written by anybody else. That doesn't mean that you have to try and be super unique or super exciting or anything like that. Talking about who you are, the individual that you are, is what you want to do. That's what makes it not generic. That's all you need to do. You don't need to try and make it something that it's not. You're just talking about who you are. Not being generic is just making sure there are enough details about who you are as an individual that nobody else could write that same statement. We all love our quotes. We love Gandhi. We love Atul Gawande, but please try not to put those in your personal statement. This is not Gandhi's personal statement, nor is it Atul Gawande's. You want to be quoting you. Sometimes it's you. Somebody says something so perfectly, and you just really want to quote them, but the admissions committees have read all of the quotes before. They want to hear from the one person they haven't heard from before, and that's you. I know that sometimes you'll hear that, you don't want to use too much of the space, but you really, that you should be short, and admissions people appreciate that. They do appreciate brevity. However, this is your opportunity, your one opportunity to talk to them directly. So what I would say is you want to use your space, but make your personal statement so good that they don't realize that you're writing and using all of the characters. For the MD programs, you get 5,300 characters. That's the longest of any of the fields. The other fields are more like 4,800 characters. That's about a page and a half. So you're not getting the opportunity to write a ton here. So you really want to take advantage. Obviously, if you're done with your personal statement, you said what you want to say, don't write things just to write things. Try and be positive. So, of course, you may have negative things that have impacted your life, and you can include those in your personal statement. In fact, they want to hear about things that you've had to overcome. And for many people, there will be some story that really personifies who they are, and it'll be something that they've overcome. But you can write about negative things that have impacted you in a way that has a positive tone to it. So it's not that you should leave out the negative, but try and maintain your tone in a positive way. And again, don't try and be, crazy. Anything that you can think of, it's been thought of before. Again, the only thing that has not been thought of before is being you. So just make sure to do that. Um, Try and steer clear. Oh, somebody is asking, does it have to be 5 paragraphs? No, it doesn't have to be 5 paragraphs. That's a very common format, but if you have a different format, um, if your personal story lends itself to a different format, then that's fine. For a lot of people, they don't have some personal story that's going to dictate the format. And so the 5 paragraph format really works well. If you have a personal story that's really shaped why you're going into medicine, your format may vary. So try to steer clear from the passive voice. And if you have a hard time with that, there is the Writing Center on campus. They work with students and with alumni, and you can set up an appointment with them. Just Google Writing Center. They're really helpful with that. Show, don't tell. So give a few details about a story. Don't say, I was fascinated being in the clinical setting. Give a few details about the clinical setting that you found fascinating, and let the admissions folks see why you found that fascinating, so they'll understand what you are fascinated with. Try and stay away from the adjectives. Enthralled. I have never heard anybody say enthralled, although maybe everybody will now come in and say, I've been enthralled with this. But try not to just depend on adjectives. Instead, use more nouns, and so more talk about your experiences as opposed to describing them. And then one final note, if you've been in a developing country or an underserved country, try not to talk about just the negative side of it. It's tough going to another country and seeing the poverty that people live in. It can really impact you. But by the time you leave a developing country, you should also be able to see that people there are just like us, same hopes and dreams, just less access to resources. So hopefully you can convey that in a personal statement. How do you decide what to include in your personal statement? Obviously, you're complex people. You've got a lot to talk about. 5,300, 4,800 characters is not that much. So ask yourself when you're thinking about things, is this part of your journey? Does it highlight the core competencies? Is it central to who you are for the purposes of this document? So remember what you're writing this personal statement for. A lot of people have something that is really central to who they are, but it may not be the most central thing to who they are for medical school, dental school, admissions. So really think about what's part of my journey to this end destination. You also want to make sure that you remember that whoever reads your application will be different from you. So when you're putting together your personal statement, you want to keep in mind that your admissions person is not going to have had the same life experiences as you, probably not going to have the same political, religious, ideological outlooks as you. Sometimes you may have to explain things in a way that, so anybody could understand no matter where they're coming from. So keep that in mind when you're putting together your personal statement. And just a few practical matters. There's a reason that we have this workshop in November and not May. You don't want to start your personal statement in May. You really want to be starting it now. You want to first spend a little time thinking about, what do I really want the theme to be? Maybe you'll be home in November for Thanksgiving or December for the holidays then. And so, it may be a nice time for you to talk to your family and sort of add to the list that you've already made. What are things that you guys think are central to my experience? What things you think are aha moments? Remembering that anything that you put in your personal statement is, they may ask you about in an interview. But, what things do you think should be the first, what I should tell an admissions committee? So ask a range of people for their opinions. You'll get conflicting feedback, but seriously consider everyone's advice and then think about, okay, what do I want to take from this? Make sure to have proofreaders so you'll, first get advice about what you want to talk about. You'll write a personal statement, you'll write a first draft, send that out, get feedback on the draft, make updates, send that out to people. Get feedback and updates. Really good people to get feedback from are, for example, we've forced you to get to know an MD, a DO, a dentist, etc. Those people who you've gotten to know, hopefully they can be something of a mentor for you, and they may be able to give you some good feedback on what you're saying. If you have an advanced writing instructor who you really liked, they would be a great person. Faculty, like your science faculty, and then, your friends and family, they're going to be good people too. You really want people who know you well to read it over and to say, yeah, I think that this really captures who you are, or, I'm not sure that this really shows who you are as a person, because you want somebody to finish your personal statement and be like, yeah, I think that really gets, or somebody who reads this can really get you from it. And so you'll incorporate all of your feedback. You want to be able to put it away for a little while, take it back out, look at it again, and make more edits. Sometimes after you've put it away for a while, you'll have new ideas. And then finally, you want to make sure to do some really good quality proofreading, spell checking, grammar checking at the end. If you submit your personal statement with an error in it, you cannot change it. So once you've submitted your application, that's it. It's there. So you don't want to be looking at your personal statement with, a spelling mistake or 2 periods at the end of a sentence for the whole time it's out there. So definitely make sure that you have proofreaders. You may have somebody who's a really good proofreader, editor, and you may want to have that person kind of be the last person that reads it over. When you're doing your secondary applications, you'll have to write a lot more essays. And so, that person could also be your proofreader for your secondaries. You'll have less time with those, and you're not going to be able to send it to as many people. So having just one person who's like that last checkpoint for you can be really helpful. And if they have the same voice as that last person from your personal statement, then, that's really good because it makes it kind of consistent. So that is the formal presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions about any of this. Is it okay to mention shadowing a particular doctor or a particular physician's name? If you're putting together your application, you're actually going to include the physician's name as in the application, so the physician's name is already going to be out there. What you want to obviously not do is put any patients' names or confidential information about patients. So if you do talk about a patient in your personal statement, you want to use a pseudonym for the patient, but the physician's name is actually already going to be on your application because you're going to write it in under your experiences. Other questions? Anyone? Is it okay to include, so I'm going to stop the recording now. Recording again, sorry. So the question is, can you include a pretty personal story to begin the personal statement? Yes, it is very common for people to include a pretty personal story as a part of their personal statement. I mean, people go into medicine for very personal reasons, and if that's your case, it's fine to include that, and the schools want to know about that. It really speaks to your motivation for wanting to be a physician. You know, if you have a family member or a friend or a relative who has been really severely impacted by an illness, and you that inspired you to medicine, for example, that speaks to your motivation to continue with your medical career. Or if, you know, it's been your own health, that speaks to your motivation to remain in the field and to work in that field. So yeah, that's something that can enhance your application. Of course, you have to realize that if you're talking about something personal in your statement, whoever you talk to in your interview may bring that up in conversation. So it has to be something that you feel like you're comfortable talking about in an interview setting. So, other questions from anyone? Okay. Oh, oh, yes. Excellent. Another excellent question. I said to avoid the passive voice. Should we use the word I? Um, yes, you can use the word I. You want to not use the word I too much, though. In fact, you want to be a little bit careful about how much you use the word I, because if you use the word I too much, it can come across as being arrogant. Um, and in fact, the medical schools kind of will have a little bit of a red flag about that. We sometimes is a better word if you're working on a research team, but basically, you want to, you know, talk about it from your perspective, so from your point of view, um, but try and limit how much you say I in your personal statement, because it can seem a little bit arrogant. And I have had students get feedback actually from admissions committees that they sounded a little too arrogant in their personal statements, and that's caused problems for them. Other questions? Okay. Thank you everyone for coming and for listening to the presentation if you're listening to the recording. And definitely do feel free to get in touch if you have questions about it. In terms of Dr. Begley and I reading your personal statements, we'll definitely give you feedback about them at your committee letter interview. So we hope you'll have a committee letter interview. Um, and then in addition to that, you know, if you would like some feedback from us, you know, definitely feel free to set up an appointment with me. If you're like, you know, am I on the right track with this? It gets a little confusing for me if I read the same statement like 5 times, but if you want to run it by me a couple times, that's fine. If you do want to set up an appointment and have me look at your personal statement, if you can email me the personal statement ahead of time, so I'm not sitting in front of you reading it while you're sitting there feeling anxious and uncomfortable, that tends to be really helpful. But definitely do feel free to do that. You probably won't have anything ready for me to read for a little bit still, but you do need to have the personal statement for your committee letter interview, which you need to do before May 15th, so hopefully you'll do it. So thank you everyone for coming, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully December 2nd.